All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Catherine, and I work with SEB Housing. This is the Affordable Housing Information Session for the 6 affordable condominiums made available at Cobblestone Court Condominiums at 7 East Dexter Ave in Woburn, Massachusetts. And hopefully you can see the screen that I'm sharing here. I'm going to have some slides up for us to review tonight. And so the purpose of this info session is to give you a little bit of background information on the condos. We're also going to cover the application, the eligibility and lottery process, and what to expect after the lottery itself. So if you have any questions during this session, you're encouraged to either go ahead and type those into the chat via Zoom, or you can unmute yourself if you have a question. I'll be asking periodically if anybody has any questions as well. As you came into the Zoom session, you noticed that you were muted. So just make sure that you unmute yourself if you do have that question. And then you also should have received a voice prompt that let you know that this session is being recorded. It is going to be saved to SEB Housing's YouTube channel for anyone who wasn't able to tune in but still wants to hear the session. So that'll be saved later on tonight. If you have any questions for us after tonight's session, you can contact us at info@sebhousing.com, or you can call the number that's on your screen as well. If you think of anything after the fact and you can't find the answer in that information packet, or you just want to know something that we didn't cover tonight. So any questions before I get going here on trouble viewing the screen, any logistical things? All right. So just some background information on who we are. So we at SEB Housing, we're an off-site affordable housing consulting group. So we've been hired by the developer to market these affordable condos, conduct this information session, collect and review the applications that come in, and determine applicants' eligibility for the affordable housing program, and then also to eventually run the lottery. So we're not a part of the sales team. We haven't seen these condos in person, but in the initial phases of this process, we will be your main point of contact rather than the sales team. Further along in the process, you will have more direct contact with the sales team if you're invited to go ahead and move forward towards purchasing a condo. So there's 2 broad steps in the process. We're going to be covering both of those during this information session. The first is to apply for the affordable housing program. So that's, we're in that process now. Some of you may have already submitted your application. Others are deciding whether or not they want to submit an application for this lottery. You'll be in touch with SEB Housing during that part of the process. We can answer any questions you might have on the affordable housing program. We'll do a preliminary review of your application, and you'll be entered into the lottery, and you'll be given a position on the waiting list if you're eligible. The second step in the process involves reserving and buying the condo. So your opportunity to do that will depend on your waiting list placement following the lottery. Page 11 of the information packet that you might have already seen, it's up on our website. It lists an approximate timeline for each of those, the processes, and the different steps in really this entire process. So if you haven't done so already, you can find that information packet, the application, and a little bit more information on Cobblestone Court at sebhousing.com. That's our website. If you click on I want to buy, since this is well, actually, first you have to click on affordable housing opportunities, and then if you select I want to buy, you're going to see Cobblestone Court Condos, a page specific to this housing opportunity. And if you click on that, it's going to have downloadable versions of the application, a template of a sample deed rider, which we'll talk a little bit more about, and then the information packet. The information packet contains most of the material I'm going to be covering in this session. So we're not going to have time to cover everything in the packet, but I am going to cover the main points in that package. Even if you are attending this session tonight, or if you're watching it after the fact, we do recommend that you take a look at the information packet, because there's just a lot of information in there that will be helpful to you. If you do choose to apply and submit a lottery application, you'll need to complete the affordable unit application. That's the name of the application. You could submit it to us in one of several ways. So you can email it to us at info@scbhousing.com. You can scan it in, attach it. You can send it as a fax. The fax number to our office is listed on the first page of the application. You can send it by regular mail to our address at 257 Hillside Ave in Needham, or you can drop it off if you're in the Needham area. That's where our office is located. You can drop it in a secure drop box. It's open 24 hours. It is located on the left side of the building, and it's checked each day, so you can go ahead and do that. So whichever one of those options works best for you, just make sure to get it in by the application deadline, which is March 27th. We do encourage you to get your lottery application in early. It is fairly brief. It's just going to take you about 10 minutes to complete. No supporting income documentation is needed at this early stage in the process, but you do need to submit a mortgage pre-approval with your application. We're going to cover that a little bit more in depth later on during the presentation, but just be aware that you will have to submit that with your application, which could take a few days to get from a bank. So applications, like I said, deadline is March 27th. They have to be delivered or postmarked by that date in order to be considered. You do not need to be a resident of Woburn for this lottery, to apply for this lottery. However, households who qualify for local preference are going to have priority on some of the wait lists, on 4 of the waiting lists for these 6 condos. I'll touch on that a little bit more later as well, but it should not deter anyone from applying. If you don't qualify for local preference, you still are going to have a shot at buying one of these condos. All right, so there is a website that the development team has for Cobblestone Court. So if you haven't looked at it already, it's up on your screen now, or at least the website is cobblestonecourtwoburn.com. A little bit more information on there, some photos and things if you want to take a look at that. We have been told that the current real estate brokers for Cobblestone Court, they're not permitted to show or have you tour the affordable units until after the lottery is held. The lottery is going to be April 6th. So about another month until that occurs. You're welcome to view the property, drive by. You can request a tour of a comparable market rate unit, but unfortunately there won't be any tours of the affordable units prior to the lottery. So just wanted to get that out there. We've had some questions on it, so we had to check in with the developer to confirm what the process was going to be. So these 6 condominiums are going to be sold at an affordable price to households with household incomes at or below 80% of the area median income for the Boston area. Just a little more information on the condos themselves. So they're located at 7 East Dexter Ave in Woburn. They all have 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and are 1,393 square feet. The kitchens feature quality appliances, wood cabinets, stone countertops. All of the homes also feature a back deck and 2 dedicated surface parking spaces that are, connected to each unit, so they'd be assigned. The community itself is convenient to routes 93 and 95, as well as the Woburn commuter rail station, which goes directly into North Station in Boston. There is a condo fee of $100 a month, and that covers your water and sewer usage costs, common area electricity, hallways and things like that, landscaping and snow removal. And then the sales price for the condos the affordable sales price for the condos is $278,400. So this price is significantly below what the market rate condos are selling for in the community. From what I could see, they're selling for around or starting at about $650,000 in the community for market rate. So since these homes are going to be sold at an affordable price, they're only going to be made available to households with incomes at or below that 80% of the area median income, the Boston area. The area median income amounts are set by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, so HUD. They release area median incomes every spring, and Woburn, like I said, falls into the Metro Boston area. All of these affordable condos are going to have what's called a deed rider filed along with the deed at the time of purchase. So this, we'll talk a little bit more about it in a second, but it ensures basically that the home remains available, or remains affordable, I should say, in the future, even if the owner eventually chooses to sell it. So just a little bit of background on that. So a deed rider is going to limit the amount for which you can eventually resell the property. So this opportunity isn't for you if you're looking to buy, sell, buy, flip, and resell a property in a year or two. It doesn't mean you won't be able to sell it for more than what you paid for it, but it is going to need to be resold to a affordable buyer when you do look to sell. So you might have some return on investment, but you're not going to see the same sort of appreciation that homes selling for market rate can sometimes see. So the deed rider just wants to make sure that all parties are aware of that going into this. There is a formula for resale price of affordable properties, and an example of that is on the last page of the information packet. The formula is also based on the area median income. The deed rider also says this needs to be your primary residence, so it generally cannot be rented out as an investment property like an Airbnb or Verbo or something like that. The deed rider also says that if you'd like to refinance or make improvements to the property, such as a new roof in the future, something like that, the Department of Housing and Community Development, DHCD, would need to approve of those changes. These are brand new homes though, so those types of improvements likely would not be applicable to you or anyone else who's buying it for many years. But just want to kind of go through those three main points of the deed rider so you're aware of it up front. So I mentioned that the mortgage pre-approval is required to be submitted along with your lottery application. We suggest that after you review the information packet, you either just copy or rip out page 10 of the info packet, because it lists the required mortgage pre-approval standards for this housing opportunity. You can bring that directly to the mortgage lender or the bank and show it to them, so everyone's on the same page with what these affordable units entail. When you're shopping for a mortgage, you want to be sure that the mortgage product that's being offered to you is going to meet the necessary standards of this affordable unit. So you might also want to bring a copy of the sample deed rider that's listed on our website. That information that's listed in the deed rider could be problematic for some lenders. Certain loans will not accept all the terms of a deed rider. So for example, the loan needs to be a fixed interest rate throughout the term of the mortgage. It also can't be an FHA or VA loan, since those types of loans do not accept the deed restrictions. So you don't want to be in a situation where the lender grants pre-approval but then backs out at the time of purchase once they're aware of the resale restrictions that are associated with affordable housing properties. And then just along those same lines, we want to mention that in our experience, it's been very difficult for applicants to successfully close with Bank of America as their lender. So we recommend that you don't use Bank of America for your pre-approval or mortgage, because their mortgage products are likely just not suited for affordable homes. But with that said, you can select any bank or lender that you choose. We just strongly recommend that you choose someone, or you choose a bank that has experience with affordable housing programs. There is a link on page 10 of the info packet that's going to direct you to Mass Housing Partnership's website. Their site is a great resource for you if you're looking to find lenders who are familiar with affordable housing in the state. You're also going to see that the mortgage pre-approval standards state that you must provide a down payment of at least 3% of the purchase price. So half of that, 1.5% of that 3%, or I should say 50% of the 3%, which is 1.5% of the purchase price, has to come from your own funds. So your loan or mortgage amount can be up to 97% of the purchase price. I'm going to stop there for a second. Any questions on the general application process, the deed rider, anything was covered so far? Anything you saw in the info pack already? All right, if not, I'm going to move on to the eligibility requirements for the affordable housing program. So these are listed on page 4 of the information packet. There's 4 eligibility requirements for the affordable housing program. The first is that everyone in the household must qualify as a first-time home buyer. There are exceptions to that definition of a first-time home buyer, but even households who qualify for one of those exceptions would need to sell their current home, if they own one, prior to closing on the affordable condo at Cobblestone Court. So I'm going to circle back with on that about what a first-time home buyer means in just a minute. Just want to list off the 4 eligibility criteria first. The second requirement is that a household's income and assets must be below that maximum allowable income and asset limit. And those are listed on your screen right now. So 80% of area median income for a 1-person household is $78,300, and so on. The third eligibility criteria is that you must be pre-approved for a mortgage. And then the fourth is that applicants cannot have financial interest in the development or be a related party. So these condos are being offered by the developer 7 East Dexter Street LLC. If you work for them or if you're related to them in some way, you may not be eligible for this lottery. Doesn't come up often, but we want to make sure that everyone's aware of it. And so to circle back on the first-time home buyer definition, so all household members are considered first-time home buyers if they have not within the last 3 years owned a home. This includes joint ownership. So if a household member was on the deed to a home along with other people, such as a partner or a spouse, you would still be considered an owner of that home. There are 5 exceptions to the first-time home buyer rule. Those are all listed in the information packet. The 3 that come up the most often, I just want to talk about briefly. The first exception is someone who's referred to as a displaced homemaker. So someone who hasn't worked outside the home for years, but works to take care of the home and the family. They've owned a home with a partner or a spouse in the past, but they no longer own the home due to a recent divorce or legal separation. So they're no longer on the home deed. You would still need to be off that deed if that sounds like you would fit that definition. The second exception is a single parent with at least joint custody of 1 or more children, or someone who's pregnant and is now being displaced due to a family breakup, such as divorce and things like that, and now we're looking for a new home to buy. And then the third exception to the first-time home buyer rule is an age qualified household. So that applies to households with a member that is 55 years or older, and that person is selling or has sold a home recently in order to purchase an affordable property. So if you qualify for any of those exceptions, you do still need to sell your home prior to buying a condo at Cobblestone Court. So this might mean if you're in the middle of a divorce right now, it would need to be finalized. So your name would no longer be on the deed before you sign papers to buy a condo at Cobblestone Court. And then second, to circle back again on the income limit. So these are affordable homes. They're being made available to purchase, like I mentioned, at prices that are lower than the market rate homes in the area or even in the community. And so because of this, the homes are being made available only to households whose total annual household income is below that 80% of area median income. So the maximum income limits for 1-person, 2-person, 3-person, and 4-person households are listed on your screen right now, and they're in the information packet. And so if you have a 3-person household, you're going to see there that your total household income cannot exceed $100,700. Like I said, these amounts change every year, but those are the current Boston area 1, 2, 3, and 4-person household area median income limits. So when we receive your application, we're going to confirm that what you've reported does not disqualify you based on these income limits. And so I mentioned before too, you're not required to submit verification of your income when you're submitting your lottery application and mortgage pre-approval. But applicants, once you do submit your lottery application, if you've been found eligible for the lottery, you're going to be provided with a documentation requirements guide by SCB Housing. And the reason we're sending that to you once you've been approved for the lottery is because that guide details exactly what types of documentation we're going to need from you when the time comes. So if you're asked to move forward and submit documentation and move on to that next step after the lottery is held, it's going to kind of guide you through how to submit your documentation, such as pay stubs, benefit statements, tax returns, that sort of thing. Just as a little preview on that, everyone who's asked to move forward, what we're going to need from you differs depending on what your income source is, and if you're working full-time, if you're working seasonally, that sort of thing. But one thing that's universal for every applicant is that we're going to need your tax returns from the last 3 years, and also bank statements. So if you have any type of assets, you're going to need to submit verification of those as well. You want to read that documentation requirements guide carefully, because like I said, if after the lottery you are invited to move forward in the process, you're going to have about a week to 10 days to submit all of that required documentation. And so although we do not require your income verification and tax verification at this time, I do still want to give you a basic overview of how we're going to calculate your income. Income for this affordable housing program is counted as a projection of your household income over the next 12 months for all household members. So that means all income from all household members is considered. And so this would include things like bonuses and overtime that you may not receive every week. The only exceptions to this is minors. So anyone under the age of 18 in the household who is earning a wage, we're not going to count that income, that wage income. And for dependent full-time students who are working, we're only going to count the first $480 of wages when determining your total household income. We are required to count gross income, so not the net income that you're taking home, but the amount before taxes. We recognize obviously that you don't take home the full amount of your salary if you're working, but the program does require that we count that gross income for everyone. So how we actually calculate your income is not one size fits all, because those income circumstances are unique for every household. Some applicants are going to have that steady weekly salary that's consistent throughout the year, but others are self-employed or working seasonally. So in those types of circumstances where your income may be more sporadic or spread out throughout the year, we might need to look back further in the past in order to project your anticipated income for the next 12 months. And then specifically for self-employed households, you're going to need to complete a profit and loss statement, and you're going to have to supply supporting documentation for your business. So your business expenses are taken into account if you're self-employed, but for households who are not self-employed, it is always going to be that gross income that we count. So in general, any income that you have been making, we're going to need to assume that you will continue to make it going forward unless we have definitive documentation stating that you're no longer are going to be earning that income source. So for example, a written letter from your employer would be potentially definitive documentation showing that you're not going to be making bonuses or overtime in the current year. But we're not permitted to accept statements from applicants. So for example, if everything that we have from you is showing that you made $80,000 last year, but you're saying that you're going to be making maybe only $65,000 in the coming year, we're still going to need to count that $80,000 as your projected income unless we have some sort of additional information to consider from you. But even if that, income, if a letter is provided, it's not guaranteed that the countable income is going to decrease. So we're going to have to take those factors into consideration when we're looking at your finances. So sources of income to keep in mind too. I suggest when you're looking at the application, you're just making sure that you're looking at the table and listing everything that you have coming into your household. Not only wages, but Social Security payments, retirement distributions, pensions if you get that, periodic payments from friends or family, any assets that are generating income. You want to make sure you list all of that so everything is accounted for. There are no minimum household income requirements, but in order to qualify for that mortgage pre-approval, you're going to need to meet the lender or the bank's requirements in order to receive that approval, mortgage pre-approval. Households cannot have more than $75,000 in assets at the time of application. So this is going to include any funds that you would use in a future down payment. So if someone gifts you, a family or friend is gifting you part of your down payment, that is going to be considered part of your asset total. So you'd need to disclose that on your application. And then any cash that you have in savings or checking accounts obviously is considered an asset. The net value of stocks or retirement accounts like a 401k. Bonds that you might have, even your Venmo or PayPal accounts, we will need statements from. Most people don't have very much money in those, but it is considered an asset at this point. So you might think it's a little strange that we're going to count money that you have tied up in a retirement account, especially since you might, depending on your age, you may not be planning to access that money for many years. The affordable program does require us to do so, since you could, in theory, access that account and withdraw funds, even though you'd be having a penalty for doing so. So it is the post-penalty amount or net cash value that we need to count if you do have that retirement account. So you'd be asked, when you're verifying that asset, you'd be asked to provide a letter from the financial institution estimating what the post-penalty amount would be. If you do have income that's generated by your assets, that income is going to be counted towards your total household income. We do not need documents for personal assets such as jewelry, art, cars, that sort of thing. All right, so we've covered the eligibility criteria for the affordable housing program and the lottery. So just a reminder again, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the chat, or you can unmute yourself if you have a question. Next section here, I'm going to switch topics a little bit and talk about the lottery itself, or lottery eligibility. So as I mentioned, if you are interested in applying, you want to get that application in as soon as possible, even though it is quite short. We're going to review that application and contact you if any information appears to be missing or is incorrect. So you'll have a chance to correct it and resubmit along with that mortgage pre-approval. If you're found eligible for the lottery, you're going to be sent a lottery application number that will be in the form of a series of numbers. This is the number that will be drawn in the lottery. We're not going to be calling out your name during the lottery. This number is just meant to be an anonymous identifier. It's not a ranking of any sort at this time. It just corresponds with the order in which we received your application. So if you were the very first person to submit a completed application for Cobblestone Court, your number is going to be A.001. On your application, you will have indicated your household type is either type 1 or 2. Both household types can apply for a 2-bedroom condo, but type 2 households, so larger households generally, will have priority. This just means that all type 2 households will be ahead of any type 1 households on the waiting list that we're going to establish following the lottery. There's additional details about household composition and household types on page 8 of the information packet, but just for your reference, all households with 3 members are considered type 2 households, as well as some some 2-person households are considered type 2 households as well. So for example, a head of household and 1 child or 1 dependent is considered a type 2 household. So the lottery application deadline, again, is March 27th. The lottery itself is going to be held virtually, similar to this, on Zoom at 6 p.m. on April 6th. Shortly after the lottery, we will create the waiting list. Top households will be invited by SCB Housing to move forward to reserve a unit, proceed towards getting a mortgage and buying one of the condos. So like I said, the lottery itself will be the same format as this session. It will be via Zoom. Numbers are going to be drawn from a box held up to the screen, so you'll be able to see it and record it. Every lottery number will be drawn during the lottery. Sometimes we think of lotteries, we think, there's 6 condos, they're just going to draw 6 numbers, and that's going to be the end of it. So there's only 6 winners, for example, but this lottery is not that type of a lottery. It's held in order for us to be able to establish the waiting list for these condos. So they create an order of priority for the next steps in the process. It's unlikely that, the first 6 people on the waiting list will buy all 6 condos. We probably will have some people dropping off in between. So if you're not selected right away after the lottery, it doesn't mean that you won't be asked to move forward in the process at a later date. If you're watching the night of the lottery, it's sometimes hard to tell what your placement actually means, since the type 1 and type 2 households will be mixed together with one another. So after we sort those results after the lottery and send you the waiting list by email, it will become much more clear. If a type 1 household is drawn first in the lottery, they're still going to be behind all of the type 2 households on the waiting list, because remember I said that the type 2 households will have priority for these 2-bedroom condos. Also households who were entered into the lottery might be found ineligible by SCB after we gather all of the income, tax, and asset documentation from that household. So again, if your number is drawn later on in the lottery, so if you're, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th in the lottery, you shouldn't lose hope, because you may still have the opportunity to move forward in the process and purchase one of the condos. So following the lottery, we do our best to send out those waiting lists to you as soon as possible. Usually they're sent out the night of the lottery or by the next morning. They're sent by email. If you don't have an email address, we'll send it out by regular mail no later than that next day. When you're reviewing that email following the lottery, you're going to find your lottery application number on the waiting list. And you can see where you fell on the waiting list after we sorted the results. And at that point, you'll have a better idea of whether or not you're going to be invited to move forward in the process. If you are one of those top households on one of the waiting lists, SCB Housing is going to invite you to move forward in the process, and that is the point where you'll be asked to submit all of the income, asset, tax documentation that you've read about, hopefully in the documentation requirements guide by that point. And you'd have about a week to 10 days to submit that requested documentation to us. Once we review your application package, we're going to respond to you within a few days. Most applicants do not submit a 100% complete application on the first try. And there's a couple reasons for that. The first just being that there's a lot of information that's required. And the second is because sometimes even if you do submit all of the documentation that was required, we might still have further questions for you after we review your bank deposits and pay stubs and things like that. So that's just why we encourage you to try to prepare all of your documentation early once you have that program documentation guide that has been sent to you ahead of the lottery. So hopefully you have kind of just a file waiting with all of your finances and things. So any questions on the lottery process, eligibility or lottery process before I move on to last couple points here? All right. So after the lottery, if you've ultimately been found eligible by SCB Housing, our next step is then to send your file to the state, which is the Department of Housing and Community Development. They're going to then do a file review to give us the green light if you're eligible to move forward in the process. So once DHCD has approved your application, the process is similar to the steps that you would be taking if you were purchasing a market rate home. I also want to mention too at this point, if you decide to hire an attorney to assist you in navigating through this process, we encourage you to do that. Perfectly acceptable and likely the smart thing to do. This is buying a home is a huge decision, and we want to be sure that everyone understands the process and you're well represented. But we usually just, towards the end of the process is when you'd be doing that normally, once you've been approved by DHCD and SCB. So again, once DHCD has approved your application, we're going to put you in touch with the owner, the sales team. So then you'd be able to schedule that tour of the condo and complete a reservation agreement. In order to reserve a home, there is a $500 refundable deposit that's required. And then after reserving the home, you're going to have about 10 business days to sign the purchase and sale, the P&S agreement, and place the required deposit, which is that 1.5% of the sales price minus that $500 that you already paid when reserving the unit. So your P&S agreement may include certain agreed upon contingencies as well as a closing date. And this is one of the final steps in the home buying process. Once that purchase and sale is signed, you're then going to need to go back to the bank or lender who issued your mortgage pre-approval, or you can use a new bank if you needed to or wanted to for any reason to obtain that mortgage commitment. So the process varies a little depending on the lender, but generally you're going to need to review, they're going to want to review all of your documents up to this point. So the purchase and sale agreement, the deed rider, and they're going to do an appraisal of the condo. And then there's SCB's final review. So households need to remain eligible for the affordable housing program up until closing. So about 3 to 4 weeks prior to your closing date, we're going to conduct that final review. We might be asking for updated pay stubs, bank statements, your mortgage commitment letter, and we're going to forward that full package again to DHCD for their final review. If you've maintained eligibility, you're still eligible for the program, you're going to move towards closing on the condo. So once you've closed on the home, you can move in, and there's not going to be any future income or asset eligibility reviews for as long as you live there. I have a question here. Yep, so someone's asking what if you're a Woburn resident? So if you're a resident of Woburn, you're going to have what we call local priority or local preference. And there are 4 of the 6 condos at Cobblestone, affordable condos at Cobblestone Court have local preference or priority. So if you're local preference and you also are, you know, a type 2 household, so a larger household, you'll have priority on those waiting lists. You do not need to be a resident of Woburn. And I should mention too that local preference isn't just limited to residents of the town. It's also anyone who has a child who goes to Woburn Public Schools or works within the town of Woburn or for the town. So again, you might have priority, but you don't need to have that local priority to be in this lottery. So that really covers everything that I wanted to get to. Again, you can find that lottery application for those affordable condos at Cobblestone Court on our website. And the sample deed rider as well as the information packet is there as well. Any final questions? Application deadline again is March 27th. So question here, are they fully built and ready for move-in after the drawing? Great question. I believe so. They are giving tours now for the market rate units, and I believe they are ready to go. So yes, they will be ready very soon after the lottery, if not now. Another question. Yep, so great question. This should always be mentioned. What happens if you're accepted, you move in, you buy the condo, but your income changes or your marital status changes a year or years later? That's fine. As long as you're eligible for the affordable housing program, when you apply for the lottery, all the way through when you buy the condo, you're good to go. Nobody's checking up on your income after the fact. So yep, you just want to keep in mind that when you're going to sell it years down the line, it does need to be sold to a affordable buyer. So that would mean that the list price that you'd be selling it for years down the line won't be as high as your neighbors. Okay, so someone is saying here it's a construction site still, so they must have a model unit that's open, and they're allowing people to see that one. But yeah, I have no indication that it won't be ready soon after the lottery. Let me double check my notes on that just a second here. But yeah, there's not going to be a significant wait for these. Just triple check here for you that I don't have an actual date. As you can imagine, a lot of the timelines change throughout the process. So sometimes they're off schedule by a couple months, but it's not usually significant. Let's see. Yeah, it looks like they're thinking April for many of these. There are 2 phases where 1, 2, 3, about half of the units are available. It's like 4 of the units are available soon, with a few others not available actually until late this year, potentially January of 2024. But there are condos that will be available within the coming month to 2 months from now, but not all of them will be available right away. Do you know if there's a swimming pool planned in the complex? I do not. I haven't heard anything about that. I do not think so. Right. So yep, someone else is asking because they were a little bit late joining. There are 6 units total. Yes, there's going to be 6 affordable condos. And if my most recent notes here are correct, 3 of them will be available very soon, with the other 3 are not available for another 6 to 9 months. Any other questions? And again, application info pack, and deed rider are all available on our website. And that application deadline is March 27th, so a little bit less than a month now. Reminder again that your mortgage pre-approval would have to be sent in with the lottery application. So if you're interested in applying for this lottery, you're going to want to get that pre-approval in order before the 27th. I'll just give it one more minute. Do you have any other questions? Let me know. All right, thank you all again for tuning in, and we look forward to getting your application. Any questions after tonight, you can go ahead and email us at info@scbhousing.com.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye now.